Hello, beautiful people. In this week's episode, I sat down with Francesca Raffa, who's a feminine freedom healer. So she's a shamanic practitioner, a light code sound channeler, and a feminine embodiment coach. I met Francesca back in September, where I was in London searching for events, and I went to this dark feminine workshop with her and immediately loved her. And so it was such an honor to have her on this episode. I hope you guys really soak this all in. This work that she does is so powerful, and I'm so excited to hear what you guys think. So much love here from Bali, and I hope you all have a beautiful day.
Hi, Francesca. Thank you so much for being here on my podcast today. I'm so honored to have you here. I just pulled a card for today, which was healing the mother line and ancestral healing, which is a incredible topic because I know we're going to dive deep into the feminine. So maybe we can just start by your journey with your feminine awakening, if you could summarize it, because I know you probably be hard to do that.
Thank you so much for welcoming me and having me here. The mother line is so funny that you pull this card. It's not funny, but it's so apparent why you would pull this card, because a lot of my journey really began with the mother lines and the mother wounds. And it's a lot of the teachings that I bring into what I teach and what I practice and what I cultivate for us all. Let me retrace my steps. Working with healing was really about connecting with herbs. That's one has been the start of my journey, but it's also like reconnecting with plants and working with herbs. So I used to have a tea company called Spiral Tea.
Okay, yeah. Spiral. And also, can we just say it's Earth Day today? So happy Earth Day.
Happy.
And also, I was thinking today how like a lot of people's journeys start with either like coming back to their bodies or coming back to the earth, and that being such an incredible portal to the feminine.
Absolutely. And one in the same. And that's really where it began. It was connecting back with the herbs, and there was this deep remembrance when I was working with them, when I was ingesting them, but I was very interested in working with the plant spirits of them and understanding how they were allies for us. And then that really took me into the journey of reclaiming my own body. Of course, womb work was a huge part of all of that, an integral part of awakening the feminine. That is the feminine center. And I struggled growing up with severe menstrual pain, and it actually runs in my lineage. My mother had it, my grandmother had the same, and it was like it was breaking with me. We're not repeating this cycle. And yeah, such severe pain where I was actually wouldn't be able to do anything for 3 days. So I would vomit, and it was just like to the point where the pain was so bad I would actually cause pain in other parts of my body to deflect the pain that I was experiencing in the womb. And really the womb was screaming at me like, answer my call, like when we have that severe pain, it's like, look at me, witness me, acknowledge me, love me, nurture me. And for years I just suppressed that. I pushed that down, took the pill, and this is so many stories we hear that women go on, because when you go to the gynecologist or your doctor and you say you're experiencing these horrific menstrual cramps, they're like, right, well, there's two things: dose yourself up on painkillers as well as take the pill and suppress the entire cycle. So I was on that for years. Yeah. I'm sure many people listening have experienced that.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting that we're talking about this, because just this morning I was listening to a podcast about menstrual pain. I'm curious to ask you, like, what was your journey with the menstrual pain in terms of like, what was your first step in answering and that call to attending to your womb?
Yeah, it was calling for a long time, and in the process of coming off the pill, off contraception, working with herbs, because I was trying to heal it that way, working with Shetvari. I was working with rose as one of my plant allies for a long time. It still is. Blue lotus and rose are both two of my plant allies I work with. But I was trying to work with herbs to heal through it that way. And I remember when I was starting to understand how to communicate or build relationship to the womb. I was having severe menstrual pains this one morning, and I just, instead of going, right, I'm going to push this pain away or wish that this pain wasn't here, how can I surrender and lean into that pain? So I placed my hands over my wound space, and I said, okay, pain. And it was really this softening with my whole being of what do I need to know? And then with that, I started flooding with the affirmations. I love you. I'm sorry. I thank you. Like all these things that I just wanted to speak to and build relationship to. And it was that turning point really where I felt a softening somewhere within me that's what it needed to hear. It was those whispers of, I need your acknowledgement, not from a place of go away, but from a place of, how can I work with you? How can I listen to you more so that we can work together and be guided together, right?
Yeah. There's just so much here. There's so many layers to it. I think the idea of like working against ourselves, working against our flow, our seasons, our cycle, it's all, once you start to see everything's in tune, everything has a natural rhythm. And for so long, we've been pushing against that. And this journey is about coming back to that flow. But in doing that, you have to clear away everything that was blocking you from that, from what you are. And part of that is going into the darkness. And one of the things that came to me this morning to talk to you about is the dark feminine, is the hard parts of this journey, and how it's all love anyway, but also like how you help the woman that you guide through that, because it's not a step-to-step manual at all. And so when I think about all the women I'm going to help, I often think like, I don't know what twists and turns my journey is taking, let alone theirs. So how do we hold each other through that?
That's a beautiful question. And I think I love how you shared about meeting ourselves in the cycle within our seasons and knowing what they are, because the dark feminine, and if we're going to relate it into the menstrual cycle, would be the luteal and bleed stage of our cycle, which is a lot of the cycle actually, because the luteal is one of the most days. So working with the dark feminine, first of all, is kind of like, what I usually say is like, well, when we bring in this word dark, we automatically get this connotation or that, oh, it's bad. So first I kind of want to eradicate that, like clear this idea of dark feminine. When you say that, it's like, even as I'm doing it, my body's like doing, like lifting up, right? Because the dark feminine is really where our power lies. And it's reclaiming all of the parts that have been suppressed by the feminine. So our intuition, our bleed, our ability to be the seductress, which is really the allure, the attractor of creating our reality. And I think that all the aspects that have really been pushed down. Why? Because they are such powerful elements to everywhere. Yeah, the oracles. The dark feminine is the oracle.
Yeah. And I just want to rewind a bit actually, because I think people don't even know the phases of their cycle. And so maybe we could just like, you could talk about each one in a summary and just say like, I guess what seasons they relate to, and also what you need to give yourself in each one, which can vary from person to person. But if there's like a general way you normally describe it,
Yes,
that could be useful.
Beautiful. That's definitely useful, because actually backtracking to that, that's how I really began building that relationship with the womb space in the first place, was
Yeah, cycle thinking.
cycle syncing, cycle awareness. So we
Yeah.
have inner seasons, and it starts day one, day zero, which is the day of bleed, which is known as our inner winter, 3 to 5 days, let's say, of bleed. And in our inner winter, it's the time where we go inward, we go into reflection, we allow ourselves to be immersed in the dark void as our body is releasing the previous cycle, right, from the past cycle. And then after that, we go into our inner spring, where everything's starting to build. Just as you can imagine, the season of spring, or the follicular, we start to feel new life. Things are creative around us. We're starting to kind of have new ideas, get curious, be more open, ready to start immersing ourselves outward. So that is a perfect time to start planting new seeds, right, is what I would say around springtime, or in a spring, start to set those new intentions. And then we move into the ovulation, which is a short phase, probably around 5-6 days. And this is our inner summer, the full bloom. So we really want to use that energy to be out there. It's when we're going to feel the most productive. We're going to have the most motivation to actually put things into action and motion. And then we move into the luteal, which is the longer phase of the cycle just before bleed, which is your inner autumn. And this is the time to reevaluate. So it's looking at the entire cycle, what worked, what didn't work. Again, a time for contemplation and reflection to see what needs shed before you enter that bleed state. So that's the inner cycle in a nutshell, in a summary.
And that's the thing, like, it's so funny when you before didn't know any of this, and then you're like, oh, they correspond to the seasons and also like the moon, and there's no coincidence in that. It's all by design.
Yes, and that's another thing. If you don't bleed, or if you are on contraception, then follow the cycles of the moon. So full moon being ovulation, new moon being your inner winter.
Yeah. So back to what we were talking about before, about kind of changing our perception of darkness. How do we use our feelings of anger and our darker emotions? Because I know so many people come to me and they're like, I'm experiencing all of these things, and I've come to the place where I'm like, they're beautiful, they're powerful. And yeah, how do you, as a mentor, as a spiritual teacher, come to help women realize that, and how do you advise them to use it?
You made me laugh with what you just said there about it's beautiful, because someone once said to me, they're like, is anything not beautiful to you? I'm like, no, everything is beautiful. Everything is in like its integral designed way. Like it's challenging when we are in it, right? And it's really like, I'm not bypassing or not acknowledging the difficult emotions that we have to face, feel, such as anger, such as these uncomfortable emotions. And the more we can get comfortable in that uncomfortability of not seeing these emotions as, again, boxing them as good or bad, but seeing them as an emotion for transformation. So often these emotions of, anger, of frustration, of jealousy, all these ones that we've kind of deemed in the dark box, they are the main emotions that will lead us to transformation, then ultimately freedom. I'm going to just talk from my experience, and I can say from clients, but I can only teach from the guidance that I can lead myself in. And when I experience frustration, or when I experience anger, I'm like, okay, something's crossed my boundary, or something is limiting me that I'm not seeing. So it's that form of emotion that is making us aware that something is not in alignment, or we are either holding ourselves back in some way, we are overextending our boundary or not, and is keeping us from actually accessing what it is that we truly desire. So working with the emotion of anger, when it starts to come up, to actually be able to healthily express that anger in your own safe space is really important, because if we feel anger, try to suppress it and go, oh no, I'm fine, then where that anger then can come out in unhealthy, unconscious ways and forms of projection, which is all part of being able to own or be the master of our own emotional regulation. So this is why the body connection is so important, to understand how your body starts to experience the early feelings of frustration. For me, it starts as like this frustration, this kind of restlessness, this, like agitation is really what starts for me on a bodily kind of sensory level, for me to go, oh, okay, what's bubbling up here, to then have to look at. So how I really bring in that mind body connection, because without that, we aren't aware of what wants to be expressed, and then having how that can then come out on a day-to-day, where you might speak rudely to somebody, for no apparent reason. It's like these kind of things, and you're like, well, why did I even do that? And I was also using our projection as our tools and teachers. So these are kind of little things or techniques that I share for clients, and what I use for myself to help me understand my inner world.
What would you say is a healthy way of expressing your emotions? Because in what you said, and I agree, is a lot of the time when you suppress it, that's when we go outside ourselves and like rely on things to keep it all shut in. And so many people live their lives like this. But what would a healthy way of emotional regulation look like?
Having the consistency and commitment to your mind-body connection is key, to then be able to pick up on the cues. So for example, like I mentioned, when I'm experiencing the onset of anger, I experience frustration and agitation and restlessness in my body. So for me to be able to work with that and express it, I feel into where it's sitting in my body, and lean into that and allow myself to express it. Shaking is really, really great, because anger also has this, like, it's like a buildup of energy, right? That's wanting you to take action. So that's why it feels like you have an overload of it. So shaking is really good. And also, like pressing your hands together really firmly and squeezing and pushing. What that's doing is it's bringing all of the energy that's building up within your torso or within your central core channel, and it's giving it a place to surge, if that makes sense. But it's like it's allowing it to, well, you're giving it room for expression in another way through your body. These are ways to regulate, so that these are ways to work with it, rather than let it, like you said, like let it be spluttered out, or trying to find other ways to fill or put a bottle cap on what you're feeling. It's almost like trying to smooth the surface of what's really bubbling up underneath.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that mentality is echoed in so much of the way Western societies run, in like the medical system, in the idea of like healing. It's just masking and trying to really quickly find solutions. Like that's why people take the pill, and you have cramps, like do this and that will like mask it. It's that, and like once you become aware of that, that's the first step to going deeper into cultivating that mind-body awareness. And for people who don't know, I just want to go back to the menstrual cramps point, is it normal to have pain on your period or not? Like, is that something that people not should be experiencing, but what does it mean on a deeper level?
Yeah, we I don't want to say shouldn't, but in a healthy flow, pain is not something we should be experiencing. And when we are experiencing it severely, I mean, we feel it, of course, right? But when it's severe pain, where you feel like you have no other choice but to take a pill just to get through your day, we shouldn't be experiencing it in that way. in a healthy flow, when we're listening and working with the cycle on every stage. Because often if you experience pain during your bleed, it's because at some point in your cycle you weren't honoring what you were needing to be doing in that point. Maybe previous cycle you didn't give yourself enough rest in bleed, and it will come back around in the following cycle. So it's kind of, this is why cycle awareness is really good, to pinpoint your patterns. There's also loads of apps as well that are really great to be able to easily monitor how you're feeling, what you're craving, and all of this kind of stuff. Because the more we can be aware of your patterns, the more you know how to then start planning your schedule around ensuring that you're meeting yourself at each stage and harnessing the energy of each stage to its fullest, right? So if we know that in our luteal it's a great time for reflection, or if we know that in follicular it's really great for inspiration, creativity, how can we carve out time to just sit and be with ourselves in the energy that we're in, to be the receiver and the opener of that downloads? And even in bleed, we're in that void place. It's like the ultimate darkness where creation is formed. So how can we surrender and let ourselves rest before we start building again?
Yeah. And I think some people feel like they can't do that because of the pace of their lives and because of the way that they've built their lives. So what do you normally say to people in that situation?
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And it is.
I know it's a hard question. I just
It is a hard question. It is a hard question, but I think we're starting to see more understanding of cycles within companies from what I've heard. And how, if you it's difficult because there's things and there's forms of what you have to do because of, and I know this because when I worked in corporate, it was very difficult. It was very difficult to just, I need to do this. And I haven't been in a position where I have knowing these cycles. But I think you can still make sure that you are connecting in with yourself every day. So it's again coming back to those commitments of the mind body and being able to pick up on your subtle cues. So even if you are at work and you're starting to notice, oh, I'm starting to feel overwhelmed because my body's sensation is doing this, and I know that that's in relation to me starting to feel overwhelmed, starting to feel stressed. In those moments, how can you find space to go to the bathroom, take a few intentional deep breaths? How can you ground back in? So the more you build the connection with your mind body, the more you can pick up on the cues in the moment, so that they're not building up over time and then it becomes this. Yeah, does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it's just learning how to regulate yourself and mastering that, and knowing that, like, I think the mind often, like, when they hear this, just goes to, like, your ego is just like, I can't do it. You're just looking at the obstacles because that's what we're wired to do a lot of the time. But know that there are subtle things you can do. Like, we all have access to air. We all have access to, like, elements. Even if you can't go to the ocean, you can just splash your face with water, or even just have it on your hands and just, or use your breath. You know, there's things that are accessible to all of us, and we're lucky to have that.
Yes, that's so
Yeah.
beautiful. Yeah. Our breath, our ability to change our thought pattern through how we speak to our body, and instead of letting the thoughts of fear take over, or like you said, the initial thought of what we want to go to is, I can't, it's not possible, haven't got time, and all of those things. And actually, if we clear that and go, what if we just start saying, I do have time. I do have time for myself. I do have time to put myself first. How would everything start shifting to be in alignment with that frequency?
Yeah, and I think even when you mentioned about how when this began, all the affirmations started flooding in, I think there's such a barrier people face with, like, talking to themselves, especially when it comes to positive. Like, I know there are studies that have been like, when people say, like, I hate myself, it's super easy, but then to say I love myself felt really, like, strange. But the thing is like, when you start anything that's unfamiliar, it's going to feel strange. but that doesn't mean it's wrong. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's unfamiliar. And it's a very powerful tool because our words are powerful. So I want to switch gears to talking more about the mother line, ancestral work, and the spiral, because that was the message that initially wanted to come through. What is the symbolism of the spiral?
So the reason why when I chose to work with the symbol of the spiral, I really didn't know the intricacy that I know of it now. So it's so interesting how that really downloaded and came through. But the spiral is a symbol that is one of the most ancient symbols because it connects. It's the symbol of connection to all. It's the cosmos move in spiral. The plants, they grow in spiral formations. So it is the way of growth, really, or evolution, the spiral represents. And the spiral is like, if we can imagine that the center of the spiral is your central core channel, your essence in the center of this spiral, and then everything that is happening around us or to us and through different timelines or whatever is like we start to go around the spiral. We never lose that center point, right? That's always there. I think that that's happening to us as we evolve. We never lose that center point. So when working with the spiral, it's important to first connect into what our center point is, that essence of who we are at our core, which truly is a being that is a soul having a human experience. So once we can understand that, everything is moving around the spiral in its formation. And sometimes we go backwards in the spiral as well with newfound awareness. So sometimes when we're picking up on a wound or a limiting belief or something that is holding us back, we may have to recognize that, oh, that may have spiraled or started back at that point in the spiral. And it's not to go back to re-traumatize, but it's to go back with a newfound awareness. And then that might come back around again later. It means that we're always healing, because in the space of healing, we meet ourselves with what is arising for us in this moment, what is challenging us, what is feeling like we are stuck or blocking us. And then we look at, especially from a shamanic point of view as well, we look at where the root of that is. And it doesn't mean that we won't come across that same wound somewhere else, even if we've met it at one point in our life. I truly believe that we have these core wounds and we work with them. And of naturally, every time we go to expand or step onto another phase of, let's say, the spiral or whatever we want to call it, we're going to face those same fears on another level, on another layer.
And like that's what the spiral shows, that you're constantly coming back to yourself again and again. Yeah. But like as you and I see, is like that's so beautiful. Like other times when I'm in that frustration, I'm like, oh my goodness, again, like I thought I dealt with this. So like we both know what it, because when you're in it, it's hard to like, even when you know the beauty of it, you don't see it. Otherwise the emotion wouldn't even be powerful if you didn't fully feel it. So yeah, that's really powerful. And I think you've spoken a lot about like working with plants, working with symbols, and I didn't really understand that for a while. Yeah, maybe you want to speak to a bit about the role that like symbols have played in your journey.
People perceive the world in different ways, and the way that they receive information or intuitive guidance. Some people might actually hear, some people see visuals. I see symbols, I see plants, I see animals, and what their significance is showing me or offering guidance for me and support. So that's personal for me, but maybe somebody else might resonate with seeing symbols and trying to understand or decipher what they mean for them. It's an offering of guidance, right? It's giving you a message of what you need to hear, maybe words of remembrance. So I don't work with a lot of symbology, but I receive symbols because it's the way you
Mm.
perceive what's wanting to be shown to be, or given me a message. Sometimes if I'm like, doing healing, or if I'm doing, I will have a plant come through, an animal come through, or a symbol. And symbols can be, we're talking about the spiral, but a symbol can actually be a teapot. It can be a table, right? This is just like symbols of anything that you then have to feel into the deeper meaning of what that means for you and in relation to what you're moving through in that moment.
They can mean different things to different people. Something like the spiral, the rose will have a whole history of meaning throughout different cultures across the world. But like a teapot, as you said, like maybe your grandma is trying to communicate to you, and like you see a teapot that looks like one when you drank tea together, or like something like that. And like there are ways that the spiritual world will be trying to communicate with you, and it's just about being open to it and realizing it as well. So yeah, with the ancestral work, I think, as you and I both know, there is like a collective feminine awakening happening right now.
Mm.
And maybe you want to speak a bit about what you notice is happening in the work that you do and downloads you've got.
Mm. Yeah, I feel the mother energy just so strongly. Coming at an aspect of, and it's interesting how you pick the healing the mother line, because when we work with the mother line and mother wound, it's really rooting back to our connection with the great mother, the earth, right? And how a lot of what we see in the way systems and structures have been created today is a removal of the feminine. So we see things all in linear, and we've completely eradicated the understanding of cyclical living. And the downloads that I've received from mother energies is she's starting to awaken within our own hearts, both for men and women, right? This is not just gendered. I mean, even though I specifically work with women, it's more because I believe that the women hold such great power to bring transformation to the planet, right? Because it's the women that are guiding men to start their journeys and awaken their journeys. A lot of the time, this is kind of what we hear, the influence that women hold for men to step more into their divine masculine. Because even from a male perspective, men's perspective, they've been indoctrinated into distorted masculine, right? And really not understanding the divinity of power. And it's really, we've been indoctrinated to having an abuse of power, or this hierarchical system that someone is in power, and not awakening to our power within and our God consciousness, right? And this is really the unity of the heart, of the union, which is what we're really hearing a lot about, and the codes of the divine union codes, because this is the new age that we're moving into, is the unity consciousness. It's the liberation, the freedom, where we can step into the interconnection of everybody. So what we do to another, we do to ourselves, and really holding these seeds within everything that we do, how every little small thing, even if it may be to you, how it has an impact on, it's like being that ripple in the ocean, isn't it? The mother is calling, and so we'll be drawn to the waters, will be drawn to the earth, which many of us are awakening up to connect back into the earth, but not connecting to the earth as, oh yes, I'm connecting to the earth, me, earth, but connecting to the earth as earth, like remembering that we are of the earth, but we are also of the cosmos. So really bridging humanity and divinity as one in that central core channel.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful process, and it's so beautiful to see it. But that's the thing, you and I both live in that beauty, but I'm also aware that a lot of people won't even know what we're talking about here at all, which is the truth. And I think a lot of people's connections with the mother are severely wounded. And so, yes, there's a possible connection with the divine mother energy, and like it's possible for anyone to get in touch with it within themselves because we are divine. But what do you say to people who like had no mother, whether that's because they've had no physical mother or they had no connection with their mother? Where do you start if that's you?
Yeah. Firstly, I always think that there's a grieving process that is absolutely necessary to feel, because
Mhm.
it's almost like you're the mother is like the tree of life, and if we've been stripped away or disconnected from that thread, so whether that be not having a physical mother, or even being taken away from her from a very young age from your biological mother, there's a grieving process that needs to take place of that part of you that longs and desires for that connection.
Yeah.
And what I see a lot of is, and I moved through this process myself, and for many years I was blaming my mother, be like, it's her fault. You know, if she did this, then I wouldn't feel like this. And there's a lot of that. And there's, of course, there's a process that comes in with the healing that we move through in that. Again, when we talked about anger, and blame is part of that. Like we want to say that it's someone else's fault. And a part of us truly believes that in a child, maybe, right? When we can bring the awareness to all of these complexities that are taking place. So if we're blaming, what are we still longing for from outside of ourselves or from physical mother? And maybe we this happens on another level, where you ask for it from physical mother, but then you seek it out in a friendship, or you seek it out in somebody else that you feel can hold that role as physical mother. And this happens unconsciously, someone to save you. You're looking for someone to save you. So it's really taking the accountability from the level of it's not anyone outside of you. No one can come and save you. It's how can you step into your own inner mother in those moments where we want the saving. It's actually ourselves longing to be saved from ourselves. So we're awakening our own inner mother to nurture the part of us that still lives in the thread of the inner child that didn't have connection to physical mother, and not still seeking that from someone else to provide that, but actually meeting that need. But again, there's a process to this. I'm talking about it on a very expansive scale because that's just how I talk, and I apologize. But there is
I'm the same. I hear everything you're saying. My brain's always like and I'm like,
right
I feel
brain.
like yeah, exactly. So I'm like, I'm with you, but yeah,
but I'll try
sometimes
and
we
bring
need
it
to,
back down to
yeah,
the thread of like, if you're in this place at this moment where you're like, it's my mother's fault, she's done this, and that's why I'm like this. I would invite you to bring in some self-compassion for your mother and actually take a moment to step into the shoes of what she moved through. Start to understand a little bit deeper about her upbringing, what her relationship to her mother was, to start to see that we actually only repeat patterns and cycles. So going back to the ancestral healing, and if we're not bringing our own awareness to break those patterns and cycles, we will continue. So when I used to blame my mother, my mum blamed her mother, right? So I have generations of mother wound issues here, but my mother blamed her mother. When my mother would blame her mother to me, and then I would go and speak to someone else and blame my mother, what am I doing? I'm repeating that same pattern. I'm repeating that, oh, she's just blaming. So it takes that breaking point of and you can only do this when you move through the process of feeling all that's there that needs to be felt. Grieve all of that's there, that's like that, because even when you're a child, you didn't have space to grieve the understanding of the disconnection of mother. You didn't have that understanding to be able to do that. So it's in the now and the adult that you can reclaim the unmet emotional expression of the inner child and come at her from a place of, I understand what you needed. And we can no longer unconsciously look for somebody else to give that to us. But look, hey, here I am. I can offer that to you.
Yeah, I think it's about going from victim to creator, which I've spoken about in other episodes. And I think is a very powerful shift for everything. And also to know that love is understanding. And once you see everyone as a child, as someone, as you say, that's just had patterns passed down, you realize that you can forgive and you can accept because everyone was just doing their best in their circumstances. And so it's actually a gift to have this awareness because you get to break that. And also, when you speak about your line, it's also like a collective feminine healing that's taking place. And maybe you can talk a bit about how we hold that in our wombs. Because I think people don't understand that either.
Our wombs are the place where we carry the connection to the mother. And our ancestral trauma is stored in the womb. Yes, the minute you're reconnecting to your womb, you're opening Pandora's box, really, to a lot of these patterns. And I loved how you shared there that, yes, it is your individual line, but it's also a collective. But to work through the sufferings of your ancestors, we tap into that through the womb space. It's awakening the feminine through the womb space and clearing out those patterns that are keeping you in the distortion and in the suppression of the gifts. Because even in our darkness, and I'm going to go back to that, but even in the darkness is where our gifts lie. So when we are tapping into our ancestral healing or reconnecting our roots to our ancestral paths or connections, we are also liberating all of the ancestors that were unable to live to their full potential and in their gifts. And in that, we get to reclaim theirs and live that out. We're simply an extension of our ancestors, and we can feel their support around us that want to live on and through us, but not from a place of being chained to their suffering or to their pain. They are almost supporting us to break free of that because that also liberates them.
I want to ask you personally where you're at on that journey. Do you feel like you've done that, or are you in the process? Because it's always a process, right? But I just felt cool to ask you that.
It is always a process. And it goes back to what I said before, when I'll meet myself on new layers. Really worked, especially last year was a big year for me around healing the inner maiden. That was a real big one, because in our inner maiden years is from when we start our menses. So all of the teenage years, which are usually quite carnage for me, specifically carnage years, because you're in that place of curiosity with and if you've not been given any form of direction, that's when a lot of our sexual trauma actually begins or can start. And when I talk about sexual trauma, this is a big part of healing our womb space, right? And working and awakening the feminine, claim our power. We do have to move through some sexual healing, because in the space of our inner maiden, without direction or without holding the respect for our womb space, we are actually opening ourselves to a lot of sexual trauma, even if it's not trauma with a big T. There are things where we've given access to ourselves without necessarily knowing if it was a yes or a no, because maybe in those spaces, for me particularly, I was intoxicated a lot, right? So I'm just going to be blatantly honest. So it's like working through those, through those layers, that all of those times where you've dishonored your own boundaries, and also having to admit to yourself the places where you self-abandoned and self-betrayed because you weren't in connection or in relation to this sacred center, to our womb space, and grieving that as well. So within that journey, that comes with a lot of grievance. But that's where I feel I am in my journey at the moment, is really stepping into what it means to be in a mother. I'm really in my creatrix energy, and it's like larger than life, right? Because the possibilities are there, but what the inner mother comes in with is discernment and focus and groundedness to apply in one area, whereas maiden energy is very much like, oh, I'm going to just be a bit of, do all this because I'm really excited and I want to try all these things. But the mother energy comes in, right? Okay, we've done that. We've got that experience now. So what is the path that we are committing and devoting ourselves to? And creating from that place, because then it's not chaotic.
Do you work a lot with the feminine archetypes with your clients, and obviously with yourself, because you just spoke about it? And if so, which ones?
Oh, yes. I love archetypal work. I actually have a program, 28-day embodied awakening program, which contains 7 of the archetypes that I mostly work with. But I love working with wild women. The wild woman is when we tap into the energy of the wild woman, she's untamed and she's unleashed, and she is the reminder of the interconnection to all things, right? But also no bullshit. I love her. But I work with the wild woman, the creatrix, inner mother, similar, right? Similar energy, and the inner warrioress. I love the inner warrior because she comes in with the protective boundaries, but the inner warrior helps us to stay committed to ourselves continuously, not only when the battle is here, but in all the preparation that is required in the training, or in this case, the commitment to practices that happens behind the scenes, so that when a challenge or a battle, let's say, is presented, we have more tools, emotional regulation, more tools and resilience to meet those challenges with more grace and with more ease, to still know and hold the seed of, when I'm in a challenge, it's because it's a transformational moment that's going to help me grow on my evolutionary path. And if we can hold that in moments that are really challenging, if we can allow ourselves to feel but be held in the surrender of that, we can move through it with more grace. We can move through it with more flow, to know that we're going to be met at another point of the cycle, and that it's simply part of the journey.
So what are the other ones that you work with in addition to that?
The others are the inner queen. Some kind of correlate with each other, but the inner queen, the inner sage, the inner healer as well. This is a great one to know when you are overgiving, to connect in with the inner healer, because I think this archetype for most women is quite natural and quite the state of nurturer. And to work with our inner healer is to know when we are giving too much and not receiving enough.
It's a big one.
Yeah. What are we feeding to get in return when we overgive? Like, what part of us is that benefiting and feeding? Working with the archetypes, I tend to use them in a form of dancing and embodiment. So I embody the qualities through movement to really bring them alive. And it is a form of both shadow work and harnessing the qualities that maybe are lacking, or vice versa.
Yeah, because each archetype has a shadow side, and so it's just an opportunity to learn about you through these archetypes, because we participate in all of them, even though there might be some that we're working with more specifically at that time, as you shared about your own personal journey. So that's another thing that if you guys are listening that you're interested in, you can reach out to Francesca about, or you can even just start reading about it online because there's tons of information about it. I wanted to give you an opportunity to share a bit about what you do, so that if people are listening and want to connect with you, work with you, I've spoken a little bit, but maybe if there's anything else you want to share in this moment, you can go for it.
Thank you. It's an interesting one when people ask me this question. I feel like I answer it slightly differently each time, but ultimately, like, the main body of my work is awakening the feminine within. It's deconditioning all of the things that we've been learnt to do, to be, to conform into. So it's stepping into your fullest potential and being in your freest expression for who you truly are, not who you are meant to be. So a lot of my work revolves around embodiment coaching and shamanic healing. So I combine body work and energetics to allow you to just step into who you are truly here to be, beyond the patterns and the things that you're here to repeat, but actually stripping that away, coming back to your core so that you can live out your full purpose, but from a place of wholeness. I think the element of wholeness is really important to bring that in.
Yeah, it's such beautiful work and you're amazing. Thank you for being here. I hope that everyone who's listening to this starts to realize something, because everything starts with the seed. Everything starts with just hearing or seeing something. So yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Wow, what an incredible episode with Francesca this was. So I hope you all enjoyed it, and if you are looking to dive deeper into the power of your feminine, I am co-facilitating a retreat in Bali this August, from August 1st to August 6th. So if you want more information about that, there'll be a link in the show notes, a link in my bio on Instagram, and also just feel free to reach out. This work is so important, not only for you, but also for your entire ancestral, future generations, and the collective. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to provide you with information, and I'm sending so much love. Bye!